apologize, Mr. Chairman. Let me just go with a couple of numbers here. Well, first of all, Mr. Rector, would you characterize Cato as nonpartisan when it comes to the immigration issue?
The Cato Institute is an open borders libertarian institution.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought.
It believes in no restrictions on immigration whatsoever, and everything that they have to say on this policy flows from that rather
slightly different position than Heritage takes.
A little bit.
I mean, I like the Cato Institute. I think they do some great work, but on this particular issue, I'm not where they're at. So to cite them as the end-all, be-all definitive statement on numbers that Heritage has on immigration policy, I don't think makes sense. Ms. O'Connor, you mentioned 7 million people with the tax identification number. You mentioned 7 million in your testimony. Tell me what that number is again. These are, because there was a dramatic increase from when the tax ID number was first put in place, I believe you said in the mid-90s, to where it is today. Right. Can you elaborate on that, please?
That 7 million number is a couple of years old already. The Internal Revenue Service says it issues about 2.5 million additional I-10s every year.
So that number, that 7 million was from what year?
I think that was 2009.
So it's significantly higher today.
Right.
And the 5 million who are just part of the president's latest, would they be reflected in the most current number, whatever that number is, or is that going to be 5 million additional added to that number?
That's a good question. Since we know that many people who are in the country illegally are already paying taxes,
right,
and that they use ITINs to do so, I wouldn't imagine that the president's action is going to increase the number of ITINs
dramatically, but it increases
that much more than it increases every year anyway.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Camerata, you mentioned I'm just jotting down notes here. You mentioned $4.3 billion number from a 2011 study. Tell me about that again.
Right. Well, the Inspector General went through and looked at all the people in the United States who were working and filed an income tax return using an ITIN, and then they gave them $4.3 billion. The Inspector General report is very clear that basically all these individuals are illegal immigrants getting the ACTC, the cash portion of the additional child tax credit. That is, they didn't pay any federal income tax, and they gave them $4.3 billion instead.
Okay, and so I'm not sure if the chairman asked this question in his time, but based on what the president did in November, the additional $5 billion, and this sort of relates to the previous question I just asked Ms. O'Connor. What do you anticipate that number? Is it going to go up significantly? What's going to happen?
We would certainly expect that now that they have valid socials, more of them would actually work on the books. We think right now only about 55% of illegal immigrants work on the books, but presumably that number would increase with legalization and valid social security numbers. So the number of people getting the EITC or the ACTC, which we've been discussing here, would grow proportionally, depending on how many people come forward. But okay, obviously, if it's a lot of folks, it'll run into the billions.
Well, I got you, Mr. Doctor. The numbers you cited the Inspector General. Mr. Cartwright made a big deal of the Inspector General in his previous time. In your estimation, the reports and the numbers you've received from the Inspector General, are they in any way not accurate? Is there some doubt as to the validity of the reports and numbers that the Inspector General has brought forward?
You know, these are pretty straightforward. How many people are filing income tax returns with?
So it doesn't matter if the Inspector General is Russell George or Santa Claus, right? As long as the numbers add up, it adds up, right?
I have no reason to doubt them.
Now, the Democrats like to make a big deal out of Mr. George, but the fact is, when Mr. George discovered the targeting was taking place, he gave a heads up to the Treasury Department. He gave a heads up to the IRS. This is clear back when it was before the presidential election. He gave a heads up to everyone else. He didn't give us a heads up. I'd have liked for him to told Congress that the IRS was using the terms Tea Party and Patriot to identify groups and put them in this category where they never got their tax-exempt status. They like to make a big deal about they filed some ethics charge against him, but the truth is, Mr. George, if anyone has a complaint with Mr. George, it should be Republicans, because he told the White House and the administration information before he ever told us. In fact, 6 months before. So this whole idea that somehow these numbers are not valid, not accurate, makes no sense to me, and we can make a big deal out if we want, but the fact is they targeted conservative groups. Now they're just giving us accurate numbers. This is simple mathematics, right? Yeah. Simple
of
math.
my knowledge.
Simple math, and you guys are bringing that information forward. And for that, we thank you, and I yield.
Congressmember, if I may add, the same TICTA report.
The gentleman's time's expired.